But let me maybe first introduce very, very briefly, because I don't want to waste too much time on introductions. So here on my right, we have David. You met him already before because he presented to you. I'm going to let him afterwards say something about himself very briefly. Next to him, you have Nejc. Nejc, you say, or I'm sorry?
It's Nejc, but I'm also used to Nejc.
Nejc, okay. I'm sorry about that. Okay, Nejc, hello, hi. And he is from Slovenia. He is a lawyer, and he works a lot on ICOs, if I understand correctly, and on blockchain, and on other transactions. Next to him, you have Pierre Marro, and Pierre Marro is working for DG Connect at the European Commission, and he will have a lot to say about regulations and about how to handle this, and also explain to you how you should handle that. And we have Letitia, who spent most of her time, I think, into compliance, into fintech. When I looked at your LinkedIn profile, I think you made almost every bank that is existing there, so you really know what's going on. So if you have any questions about compliance, she's your lady. And then we have, last but not least, you just met him before. This is Arnaud, and as you saw, he did this GIVE Foundation. So let me maybe hand over really briefly to all my guests. Please say one sentence about yourself, what you're doing, and most importantly, what are you working on? What is your latest project?
It's a bit embarrassing because I'm going to try not to repeat myself too much. But clearly I'm the chairman of Cofound.it, and currently we're really working on helping the entire startup ecosystem become more efficient and develop faster.
So the way blockchain businesses are run, they don't fit very well with the way existing legal rules are written. So what we're mostly trying to do is to help companies tailor their operations in a way that they would fit the law as good as possible. And on the other side, we're trying to raise awareness of which parts of the law are really, really outdated and do not match the way people interact and live today. So that's what we're trying to do.
So I'm working for the European Commission, DG Connect, but I'm working for the unit which is called Startup and Innovation. So you introduce me as regulators, but it's not my single interest. I mean, in a way, what we aim to do at the European Commission is to find the right framework environment in order to enable innovation, in particular in the blockchain, and we have seen also potentiality with some of the previous presentation. We are also in charge of the regulation and policy measures, so we have different mix of tools or initiatives that could be taken at this level.
Okay, so a little bit about me. I was a banker for 15 years. I worked in debt capital markets, equity capital markets, and then moved into regulation and risk. And I now am independent, and I work as a consultant. I help banks to transform either their regulatory technology so that they can better report to their regulators, or to transform some of their business processes so that it's more efficient. So the most interesting project I'm working on at the moment is with a Japanese bank, which is using blockchain to transform their letters of credit and trade finance. So that's quite interesting.
Can you please either turn up the volume a little bit, or
I can,
you speak a little bit closer to the microphone?
Eat the microphone.
Yeah.
So besides what I already told you, and my really focus is social impact and blockchain. I really believe that blockchain is here to help us have a huge social impact, way beyond what we have been able to do so far. I've also created a few years back a movement and technology and a method called Heartfulness, which purpose is to help us to become more positive and happy and loving people. And so it's another aspect of what we're doing. I love you too.
Okay, well, thank you very much. As you can see, what can we expect from the blockchain revolution? So I do have a blockchain, or I have a revolution T-shirt, so I hope this is going to help him as well, I think. So we already make a statement. So my first question, I guess, is now to you, because you're running an accelerator. If you look at the other 3 presentations or 4 presentations we had before, what do you think of them? Are they revolutionizing? Are they disruptive? What are your thoughts about them?
So firstly, I never publicly speak about anybody's projects and coins, because I spend my life having to say to people when they say, what do you think about investing in EOS? And I go, I have no idea. I'm not giving advice. I'm not regulated to give advice, and I will not give advice. There certainly were some very, very interesting applications that were presented. We in Cofound.it have been involved in one within the art industry ourselves, and certainly within the other spaces, there are things we've looked at. We see true applications within all of these spaces. What I would warn everyone is it takes longer than you think to truly see the adoption when you put in totally revolutionary technologies or mechanisms of using things. What we should be starting to see is exactly with the letters of credit, actually, which HSBC also put a project live last week. We should start seeing actually transparent applications of the blockchain, where actually the people from the end user perspective have no idea that these things are happening, and that really the transport layer within the communication system are carrying that through. So we'll start to see some of those happen, and then the applications, the dApps will sit on top of that. And really, actually, most people that use the blockchain time shouldn't know they're using it. As is true with the internet, the true underlying infrastructure, you go to Google, you type in what you want, it gives you the answer. You actually, 90% of you actually have no idea how that really works, probably. You really need to be a very old person like me, having worked with IBM in the 1980s, to have any damned idea. And even I would claim I don't know that much. And the same, hopefully, will become true in the blockchain.
Okay. Thank you very much. How do you see this from a European perspective? I mean, mostly, one question I have to you is, like, for me, blockchain is all about becoming decentralized. Like Brussels has often a little bit of reputation to centralize everything. So how do you cope with this, and what would you suggest to these companies you have seen before? Actually, before you answer, please, I want to do this, and here everybody asked me to do that. Let's have some interactivity here. So please, if you have any questions, just shoot them up on the wall. We can do this interactive. If you have the courage, and I hope you do, to get up and to ask us a question, please do so. You can be as provocative as you want. So over to you.
Yeah, just to react about the vision of Brussels being a centralized place. Actually, the European Commission was created also to improve collaboration and in doing business across Europe. So this is where we see, with the new paradigms introduced by blockchain or DLT, distributed ledger technology, we see a lot of, I would say, natural fit with what we try to aim to do at European level. And therefore, we are a great believer about how this new wave of technology will transform our businesses and how we can take benefit from it in doing things in Europe. So I think this event today illustrates that despite differently from other type of technologies that were mostly developed and exploited in the US, and you are a good example in your career about it, we see that around the blockchain ecosystem, it's more spreadly distributed, and we have a very good asset in Europe. I don't want to say that we are a leading continent for blockchain, but we are not too far from it. So previously there was a question about Europe versus US. So we have to be self-confident, and another good consideration is that it's not only UK or Germany or France, or it's not only the big country. Slovenia is a perfect example where even a small country can be really at the front runners in innovating in that. So this is where we we see a lot of how to say potential in blockchain. This is what we try to ensure at Europe level, that we do not miss these opportunities. That we need to ensure that Europe will seize all those opportunities, and for that it relies on different aspects. One of it is first to help to consolidate the innovation ecosystem. Another one could be help to ensure that we have an enabling framework. Another one could be also to regulate to strike the right balance in regulation. Here we could have a reflection about the fact that regulation could be also an accelerator for the technology. And I think it was said previously in one of the presentations that GDPR could be one of these major regulations that will accelerate the uptake of blockchain-based solutions.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Then let's go maybe a level down, because I'm actually originally from Switzerland, and we're not completely in the EU, as you all know, and we are very like pro blockchain and like pro crypto. But how does that look now on the level of Slovenia, Nejc? And because last year when I was here, I remember that we had a lot of hopes that actually the government would do some changes to be more open for like blockchain companies and also cryptocurrencies, ICOs, etc. How do you see it today, and how do you see this compared also to Europe?
I mean, from the perspective of Slovenia, I think for companies here, a greater challenge is to see what's going to happen in other countries, which are target markets. It is really important what the regulation is also in target markets, because that's where you seek your customers, and that's where you want to offer your services. So obviously it is important how are things regulated at home, but when it comes to discussing blockchain regulation, I think looking at single countries just makes no sense to me. That's why we've been eager promoters of having these discussions on the EU level. We have been trying to avoid also including our USA friends in this discussion, because the way the regulatory situation is in the USA and the way it is in its current state in the EU, it's in its fundament so completely different that it requires a different approach. So the issues that American regulators are facing, maybe on the surface, they look very similar to the ones we have here, but deep down in their roots, they are fundamentally, they originate from a completely different reason. That's why I think that the opportunity is in the EU thinking about what to do in this field. I think the EU is on the right way, not just because, I'm not saying just because Pierre is sitting here next to me, but I actually think that there have been small steps that have been made and make sense. You know, for instance, the new AML directive, which was passed in the parliament yesterday, I think, or confirmed, I think, these days. This is a regulatory action which does not, hurt the blockchain businesses. Actually, it removed an important regulatory uncertainty in that area. We can discuss if they could have done it better or not, but they definitely didn't block any of the businesses, which I think is very important. And if we look at the process in Slovenia, I think that everything that happened in the last year made a lot of sense. So the country didn't jump into changing laws, but the country made a lot of progress in educating the regulators, educating experts in all the ministries to really get to know the blockchain very well. And a result of this process was a lot of clarifications given from the regulators as to how they see certain things happening in the market and how that fits the law. Even if we look at Switzerland, it's, a similar process took place there. Switzerland, to my understanding, also hasn't changed any laws, but really looked into how current market behavior fits into the current regulation. And speaking of that, and maybe that's going to be part of the next question is this the opportunity to change certain rules that we have in place now? Because, for instance, securities regulation is something that was drafted 100 or more years ago, I think. So the question is if the concepts still fit into how the business is done today.
Okay, thank you very much. I have maybe one quick practical question as well to you, Nejc. In London, for instance, or in the US, like typically, if here one of the startup wants to do an ICO, from a legal perspective, it costs around 100,000. That's what I heard in the US. I had long discussions in the UK. They charge around £20,000 just legally. How much do you charge, for instance, if a Slovenian company now wants to do an ICO and they want to come to you? What is the average? I mean, I know it's a difficult question, but it's also hard for lawyers to make a decision there, because in the US you have the tendency to ask much more money to launch an ICO than in EU, and that was exactly the problem of the lawyer in the UK.
So I think using a term ICO is very deceiving, because a token is an empty sheet of paper, and it greatly depends on what we write on it, and legal implications come from there. So I think whenever it comes discussions to regulatory issues of ICOs, I think if you ask it in that sense, it's too general. Speaking of the fees, the idea of blockchain was to give people access to things that they could not have done before. And if this blockchain revolution is only going to mean that we facilitated an opportunity to raise capital on the, let's say, in the uncertain regulatory area for huge fees, I think we failed as a group of people endorsing this blockchain revolution. I think that's a complete failure. The idea of something like that was to enable entrepreneurs to get access to their users, not to access to people with tons of money who are throwing them into ICOs and trying to flip whatever they invested into. And the idea of the fact that someone now, the latest numbers I've heard from the USA are not nearly to 30,000 K anymore, but they rotate up to 1 million and even more. I think that's a failure of all of us.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So before we head here to one of the questions, because you become very active, thank you very much. I want to ask something to Letitia. You also run like startup Manufactory, so I'm sure you have many of your startups coming to you and say, okay, I want to run an ICO, or I want to do blockchain, for instance, in fintech. That's your specialty. What do you recommend to them? Since a lot of laws and regulation are still in the moving, in the flux, there's nothing really there. What do you recommend to them?
I think for me, I'm a very practical person, so I always think in terms of...
A little bit closer, I'm sorry. A little bit...
yeah. Sorry. So I'm a very practical person, so I always think in terms of, does your business actually need to raise an ICO? Is it better to raise money through a traditional method? Because if you don't have business traction, yes, an ICO might be attractive because it's for complete startups. However, there is a reputation now with ICOs, and I think in order to avoid getting this typecast, businesses have to, or new businesses have to actually think about growing organically, getting some traction, getting some customers, because actually customers are also another way of funding your business before you think about fundraising. And when you want to think about fundraising, is it actually better to consider a traditional method like VC funding, PE funding, or even European funding? So I know, for example, that the European Commission has a lot of open funding projects for new businesses, new technology businesses, before thinking about an ICO. So I think it has to be on a case-by-case basis. And then if a business actually does want to do an ICO, we have to look at the business itself and look at its validity in terms of, will this project earn money for investors? How will it earn money? What is the integrity of the business itself? And also in terms of costs, it costs, over 100K just to do an ICO in itself. That's 100K that you could actually just put into the business. So I'm not anti-ICOs, but I'm just practical and think, is it right for your business? You know, you have to go through those steps first before you get to the fundraising step, and then think about what type of fundraising you should go for.
You just mentioned a very good keyword, is all the reputational risk, what you just said. And that, I think, is actually another question also to Arnaud, is you want to do social impact, and you mentioned before in your presentation that you want to launch an ICO. How do you deal when you do social impact on one side and reputation on the other side with ICOs? How will you deal with that?
So if I understood the question, how do we handle reputation related to ICOs with social impact? I don't think it's a problem. If you are true to your purpose, then all the people that will resonate with you will come and do whatever they need to do with you. That's it. So the bottom line, I think, Give is a magnificent illustration of what blockchain is in reality at the bottom. And then, you know, you have all the greedy Lamborghini investors and so on that are, and the ICOs, the related ICOs that are there to grab the money and buy islands and all that stuff. Great, awesome, people have fun. But blockchain is not about that. It's about changing the world and make it an amazing, beautiful paradise, as it already is, but a better one still.
Okay. So let's take one of the questions there, and I think let's take first Matt, because he is not anonymous, so Matt must be somewhere here. So how does blockchain affect the social contract between the government and its citizens when the information on the blockchain is even immutable for the government? It is not giving up governmental authority to technology. Who wants to answer that?
I've spoken long and hard on this. It is the wrong time for us to try and bring blockchain to the government. I've had 3 or 4 companies approach me, very keen on doing that. We're currently, if you look at the blockchain world, the largest focus most probably is within the financial services sector. Yes, I truly believe what we will see is an increase in transparency between the citizen and government. But that should not be the initial focus, because the politicians probably don't want quite that see-through visibility at this stage, shall we say, and I would far rather they put in legislation for the rest of the world that then gets backed into legislation that relates to government. By that point, we have a far stronger industry and a far stronger voice to be able to change government. Doing it now may possibly turn government against the blockchain. So anyone who's looking at doing this, I truly do believe in it, do not get me wrong, but timing is really, really important.
I think, Pierre, you want to...
Yes, indeed. I think when we say blockchain, we can have different timing perspective. And one is, the full decentralized model that was actually introduced by the first blockchain application, Bitcoin one. And it has created a lot of phantasm or fear or expectation. But now when we look at the presentation that we have today, we see that it's much more a technology that will help to solve or to be more efficient or to innovate in delivering services or improving existing services or creating new type of services. And when we contextualize things, we will realize that even for government, there is a full opportunities to use blockchain. And this is what we are going to discuss. I mean, we have 1 month ago, we have an event where 21 member states plus Norway, and it will be joined by other member states. So Slovenia is one of the signing countries of a declaration to create a kind of partnership between government in order to think about, in particular, to think about how to use blockchain for government services. But we are not here about a new model of decentralized, abolishing government and stuff like that, which indeed could be still a vision. I hope that it's not something we need on short term in Europe, but however, we see already opportunities for blockchain to create more efficiency in government services and also to improve the trust. We can always improve for trust provision, even if we can consider that in Europe most of the government are doing good job, we can always improve the trust, and here blockchain can help a lot.
I think you said it right, that there's a lot of technologies to improve efficiencies in government, as you just said, but I think one of the challenges there is to find the right business model, so to really make a business, and that's all about revolution. But there's actually one question to Letitia over there. When do you think banks will accept the crypto and the blockchain, if ever?
I think I know who's asking that question. Wow, I think there is a positive progression towards acceptance, but I think we have to understand what really are the concerns of regulators, and it's things like consumer protection, it's things like surveillance, anti-money laundering, sanctions, etc. So where cryptocurrencies have a reputation of circumventing this is what is a great concern to regulators. However, I will speak only for the FCA, the UK regulator, because I work quite closely with them. They're not anti-cryptocurrencies, they're just trying to understand actually what is the purpose of a cryptocurrency and what is its utility, if it has a utility. So in the same way that FINMA has classified various types of ICOs, the FCA is also working to try to classify various cryptocurrencies to understand what their underlying function is. And they are working with a consortium called Crypto UK, which is a consortium of about 6 various exchanges and cryptocurrency funds, and they're working with them to understand how cryptocurrencies work, and therefore they will make regulations based on those industry experts' advice. So I think it's happening kind of, in closed doors, and it's just a matter of time until the market will know about it. But it is happening nonetheless, and I think regulators will begin to accept it as long as they can have that regulatory engagement with the players in the market.
It's interesting you're saying they're trying to understand. Is it trying to understand, or is it being really scared that they're getting disintermediated?
Sorry, what was the latter? Are they scared?
Is it more that they want to understand, or are they out of fear that they do that because they do not want to, disappear?
I think it's probably a little bit of both, but I would say it's more understanding than anything else, because what's really great about the FCA as a regulator is that they're very open to technology, they're very open to innovation, and they run what they call tech sprints, where they give companies, small companies, companies of any size, the opportunity to come and show their technology to them so that they can really understand why the technology is beneficial. So I don't think it's as much fear. I think what you have with regulators is that most of these people don't come from industry. They don't necessarily have a technical background, and they have to work with something which they have to be brought up to speed in terms of how it works. So the way that they do this is to actually engage physically with the market players, because they need that level of understanding in order to make good policies, good regulations.
Okay. We have here another question at Pierre. I'm trying to take the questions that go directly to a person. Which country has the most ICO blockchain-friendly regulations?
Well, first we need to see, to take a little bit of time in order to give awards or stuff like that. But those who have moving ahead regarding ICOs, I don't know if it is a truly open country, but Gibraltar has made a very concrete proposal on ICOs. I think that Malta is also looking for, but I see you react. So, but I know that even if it's not yet disclosed, that you are working also hard in Slovenia in order to adapt the existing regulatory framework. France, the Autorité des marchés financiers has made an open consultation by the end of last year. They have produced a result, and they are now thinking about how to adapt the regulatory framework to ICOs. And of course, at EU level, we are also addressing specifically this issue. I mean, we have the Commission has adopted in March this year a FinTech Action Plan, and where we address the ICO. So for the time being, it's in the end of the supervisory authority, so the ESMA, European Supervisory Authority for Market, which is investigating the case. But the point is, it's good that we have countries taking initiative in order to provide a more enabling framework. It's also good if we could reach a kind of harmonized situation in Europe, and avoiding that there is a race for differentiation. But by definition, when you are a startup acting in Slovenia, you do not target the single Slovenian market. You want to grow across border. From Europe, beyond Europe, and this is where it's important that we end up with a system which is as harmonized as possible within Europe.
Okay. One question to Arnaud. So we are talking here about revolutionizing, or the revolution in blockchain. You want to offer a very interesting platform, I think, to kids. And looking at my nephews, as an example, they don't understand why they have to go to a bank to send money to somebody else. They just want to do it directly over Facebook or whatever, or even Snapchat. They also care less if it's actual money they have in their hand or if it's a value they transfer somewhere else. So how will you explain this to all their parents, what blockchain is, and how can you really leverage your social impact you want to do with this by explaining this?
The first part of the question was?
How will you explain this to parents? Because the parents obviously have to agree, I guess, or did I misunderstand?
Parents, okay,
yeah,
got
parent.
you. So it's related with the question here, what is the major break for blockchain adoption? Because obviously we have to solve this issue if you want to scale to hundreds of millions of kids, let alone the parents, which is, well, don't start me on that one. Anyway, the bottom line is blockchain is coming mass market the day we solve the UI UX issues. That's it. The moment we are able to integrate all the blockchain's purposes and features and nobility included in it within the same mobile app that I'm using every day and all that. And obviously there are some stuff that will change, of course. But we want it to talk to us, right? Because if not, we're not going to use it. And that's the bottom line. There's nothing else. So the parents will act the same. Basically, if we provide them with a tool that makes sense, that is convenient, that is safer, and provides more security to their kids, they're gonna go all in because it just makes sense, right? So it's common sense.
Okay, and now that you have here somebody...
the social impact aspect, sorry. Now you got the second aspect of the question. Well, the social impact is multidimensional by definition. It's holistic. It's not linear. And so we, a blockchain and what we're doing at Give really has major impact at all levels. And more importantly, talking about your nephews, I think it's a very interesting point where providing to others the power on what is more valued by us, which usually is money, or most of us at least, doesn't make sense. Why do I give power to someone else that will handle all that I have, giving it to them? I trust you. Why wouldn't I do it myself? Why don't I trust myself to start with? Why don't I own all that I have and have the power? I think there's Andreas Antonopoulos, the big blockchain thinker who said, and I'm paraphrasing, that he dreams of a world where 6 years old will be able to create their own central banks in a few years. Well, that's where we're heading.
I think Dave wants to say something. He was smiling.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
No, it's just, how many people here know how to use TCP/IP? Does anyone know what that is and what you need to do with it? Okay, that's the internet, people.
Yeah, very good metaphor.
And I was working in Southampton in the very early 80s on it with IBM, and no one nowadays really even hears about this stuff. This is what I was saying earlier. It's all to do with the UX and having wallets for kids that are easy to use, that are natural to use. They use their fingerprint for money like we do with banking apps, and just make it really simple. Once it becomes simple, mass adoption will happen.
Thank you, David. And since you're one of the startups here on the panel, what would you, or what are the challenges you are seeing, and maybe ask your questions to either like somebody who is helping startups with compliance, or more from a new perspective, or more from a lawyer perspective. What are your challenges you're facing, and what would you like to ask them?
Or to ask you guys, what are the challenges? Maybe if we, all of us, were going towards more and more simplicity and less having fear of what would, what could, and what usually doesn't happen. Can we do that?
Okay.
Who wants to answer? Maybe the question was not really adequate. No? Is there a way for us as societies to go towards a more simple processes and, in this case, adoption, right, of new concepts, something that is less complex, less fear-driven?
It's very risky to ask a lawyer about visions and future, but I would say that yes. And we as a society, we have gone through these processes in history a couple of times before, when technology changed the way people interact, the way businesses interact among themselves, with their consumers. And I think blockchain is doing this again. Now the question is, which parts of the law become obsolete because technology is protecting the stakeholders from something that we needed regulation before? You know, probably the victims in financial industry of blockchain would most likely be the brokers, the escrow services providers. Not that they would die completely, but an important part of their business, if not vanish, would at least be radically changed. Most likely the way blockchain works is that blockchain could make certain transactions easier, simplified, faster, cheaper. But I do agree with David's point, and I think comparison with TCP/IP is just amazing. And I think we should more discuss and think about which real-life problems or annoyances we can solve using this technology. We should also, and that process is also already taking place, think about which parts of regulation prevent use of technology in that sense. I think that currently there is too much attention when it comes to regulation put on ICOs, because you know, this is an issue that maybe the issue that ICOs brought up as a funding mechanism is whether the definition of, you know, professional investor, for instance, is still appropriate for today's world. We don't think about the fact that maybe, you know, these statements or these definitions are just too wide. Just for instance, if PODIM issued the tickets to enter the event in tokens and sold them on the internet, so what would that be? A new token created and sold in the internet. It's ICO, it's initial coin offering, but we are selling, you know, tickets. So why would, you know, the law has already given an answer to how to do this. There is no obstacle that you would ICO PODIM in that way. The issue is that ICO brought up, you know, the whole phenomena brought up certain questions whether other parts of regulation as they are today still make sense or not.
Okay, thank you. Let's take another question. What is the major break for blockchain adoption? Who wants to answer that one? The middle one. I think I'm going to give it over to Dave for that.
Oh, second one. Second. So, what is the major break for blockchain adoption? We've already discussed it's to do with how the UX works and the interaction with people. Some would say we've already broken through. I mean, it depends, what do you mean by breakthrough? Do we need a television in every home for television to be a success? Or did we know television was going to be a success in the 1960s when it was black and white and none of us could afford it, and the first thing we saw was a man landing on the moon at somebody's house on something this size and very bad black and white. Seeing the future has never been easier, people. It's people like you who are here to either learn or to contribute, who can see the future and sees there is something here. Is it going to have ups and downs between here and there? Are things going to change? Is government regulation going to change it? Is some of the ICOs going to be scams? Were some of them scams? Absolutely. Many were. But that isn't going to kill the onward move of technology, which we're going to see move forward. And I would honestly say the largest breakthrough has happened already. Now we're moving from universities through to academics and large corporates before we get to consumer adoption. There's nothing, I mean, everyone is making this sound like it's something that has never occurred before, and this is absolutely standard technology adoption mechanisms being followed.
I agree with you. Thank you for that. And the next question is blockchain in danger because of different interests of big corporations and lobbies? What will happen if blockchain does not follow through? Who wants to answer that question? Again, Dave? Or how about Pierre?
Here again, it depends about your positioning. I mean, is blockchain in danger if large corporation or large organization adopted? Yes, I mean, it could be the opposite. It could be when the large corporation will include blockchain in their daily process or relationship with customer. It will be when blockchain will be the big, really meet this maturity level. And we are not too far from that. I mean, as you say, I mean, in the banking areas, they are doing a lot of proof of concept, pilot, and I think in the coming years, in particular for trade finance or settlement, we'll see them adopting blockchain first for B2B transaction, but then also sooner, a bit later, also for interaction with the customer. And it is the same in other sectors, like in the energy sector, we have a huge interest from big group providing energy. Blockchain could also provide new solution for using efficiently renewable energy and sharing it with your neighborhood. But in the health, we have the case where it will only work when I would say the established institution, health institution or an organization will adopt blockchain. Is not so. Again, this is a question about what we consider behind blockchain. If it is the original idea of something fully decentralized, like it was introduced with the Bitcoin one, or if it is something which is a technology or a group of technology and an evolving technology that will help to provide better services, improve collaboration, interaction, and creating more trust for people.
I think Arnaud wants to say something too. We're running out of time.
Yeah,
soon.
just 1 second. I mean, it's like, this question is awesome because we could have asked the same thing in the 90s, early 90s about TCP/IP and internet.
Yeah.
Now we know where we are. So the same thing is going to happen with blockchain.
Okay, let's do all a quick closing remark. I give you each one 15 seconds because we're actually going to run out of time. So what do you see as the next revolution now in your area, or what you're hoping in the next area?
So what may also answer the last question and this very quickly, I believe that reasonably rapidly now we will see all stock markets moving to a tokenized model. It makes absolute logical sense. We won't own shares, we will own tokens, so equity tokens will become the standard.
I don't know if I can say this better than David just said it. I fully agree with this. Maybe just one curious info and, my endorsement of that. There is a EU draft crowdfunding regulation has been introduced and proposed. It's an awesome piece of regulation. It enables startups to raise up to 1 million euros every 12 months, which is more than enough for most of the startups. It's fully regulated, it's fully compliant, it's agile, it's going to work perfectly. Hopefully, it's also going to get passed. So I'm really excited about that.
Thank you, Pierre.
Oh, I think the main message is that we should strongly believe in those technology and about our capacity to fully exploit it in Europe, within Europe, from Europe. And of course, there are some challenges, but I think we are now beyond the hype curve. I mean, we are now really starting to see about real operation, real implementation. Of course, regarding regulation or governance approach, I mean, it's still evolving, so it's difficult, and the pace for making regulation is not the same as the one for developing new application or for innovating. So I think it's also important that during this type of transition period, there is a kind of self-organization of the innovators that enable to maintain this trust and believe in those technologies.
Thank you, Letitia.
Yes, I mean, we've talked about banking, we've talked about finance and, giving money, but I think for me what's going to be really interesting is how blockchain technology will be applied to industries like agriculture, like sustainability, supply chain, etc. And there are some really interesting models out there in terms of, for example, how to distribute money to farmers, because there are a lot of poor farmers in the world, so how can they get a bigger share of the profits? So I think that's something that I'm going to watch out for.
Super. Arnaud?
Yeah, to your point, yeah, more equilibrium from a financial standpoint, most probably. And also related to that, I believe blockchain is going to help us to get more into the clean money movement, meaning funneling more and more money, like trillions of dollars, into impacting our earth and our society as a whole. Until now, it was seen as something that doesn't bring back money. It was like, philanthropy. Well, not anymore with thanks to blockchain.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, the time is up. All these panelists will be around, so please go to them, ask all your questions you want. Thank you very much, each one of you. Thank you very much for the question also. So you created some interactivity. This is great. And thank you very much. Enjoy PODIM.
And thank you very much, Alex.